Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, and it is Thursday, January 30th, right this moment. So I am here with Brad Haines, the Chief Investment Officer of Juncture Wealth Strategies, to record an Investment Friday for release on Friday, January 31st. Holy cow. How is that already January 31st, Brad? Tell me, how did this happen?
I don't know. I was sitting there thinking about that yesterday. I was like, I cannot believe January is almost done for 2025. I feel like we just started the year like a week ago, you know?
Yeah, I
But
feel like that too. I felt like my kids were on winter break still until about the 6th or 7th. Well, to the 8th technically because they had snow days. So my whole month didn't really start until January 9th or so. Then I had a crazy week for a week and now here we are. Um, and also, okay, I wanted to say this because it's technically today we're recording this January 30th. Yesterday, January 29th was the 4-year anniversary of the official start of X squared wealth planning.
congratulations.
Yay, thank you. If only we
That's awesome.
had sound effects. Yeah, just imagine. So yeah, four years. This is the start of year 5 for
That's
X squared wealth
fantastic.
planning.
Well, congratulations, because that is a big feat. A lot of people do not take the entrepreneurial leap, and you did, and you're being rewarded for it. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, this year, especially 2024, really felt like that. Like things really opening up, really like getting into more of a groove, really talking about the things that matter to me more, and in doing so, reaching the people that, care about the same things, want, support from someone who they feel connected to. Like all of that has just really been working in a new way especially in the last year. So I am very excited for this year, 5th year in business. See what happens, different things that are coming up as far as with Expansive CEO, with the podcast, all of that. So thank you, Brad, for being here. I think we started recording Investment Fridays in 2023.
I think that's right. I think
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
So thank you for being part of this trajectory, and let's see where it goes.
Perfect. I love it.
Well, what has been going on this week? This week has been a little crazy. We've had some
Yeah.
real swings, real big swings. What's going on?
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been really, really fun. So everybody is probably familiar with the fact on Monday, uh, the market struggled quite a bit. Okay. And primarily that was due to over the weekend, um, for whatever reason, a Chinese AI, artificial intelligence company, made some announcements, or actually, they announced it a week prior, but for whatever reason, last weekend, everybody became aware of of this artificial intelligence language model, large language model, performing quite well compared to, ChatGPT, compared to Meta's Llama, compared to OpenAI's ChatGPT, compared to
Claude,
Gemini.
Gemini.
Yeah. So Google, Gemini, and then uh, Claude, which is those are the main large language models in the US, or at least actually based in the world, but really the US. Um, and so it basically came out and said, hey, we've accomplished all of this in 2 months' time and at a cost of $6 million. Okay. As opposed to, let's give some people perspective, billions of dollars that, for example, OpenAI used to create ChatGPT. Okay. Um, and now we're on version 4 of ChatGPT. And so everybody in the marketplace on probably Sunday night, Monday morning, we're kind of like, do we need to have this huge spend on AI infrastructure this very small, arguably very small research group out of China, called DeepSeek, can create a large language model in only 2 months for only $6 million. Okay.
Well, and this is on the heels of the Stargate um, announcement as well, right? That, hey, we're going to spend another 500
Billion
billion. I was going to say million.
over
Like, that's not
over the
right.
next 4 years.
500 billion with a B dollars
Yes.
um, on AI infrastructure. So that announcement had just come out. And then, yes, now people start sharing this information about DeepSeek that why like it took them $6 million. Like, why on earth are we going to spend 500 billion?
Exactly. And not only that, so you had the Stargate the week before, and a week or two earlier, you also had Meta coming out and saying, hey, we're going to spend $65 billion this year in terms of AI build out. And so people are like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Do we really are we at the point of maybe a lot of this capital expenditure doesn't need to occur? So all of a sudden, Nvidia really gets rocked. Their stock price goes down a lot because they make the chips that go into the servers, which go into the data centers, which allow for all of these large language models to operate on. That's the hardware piece of it. Um, Now, I'm going to put DeepSeek aside for a second, and we're going to talk about the rest of the week, and then we're going to go back to DeepSeek because I want to
Okay.
address. So then on Tuesday, Wednesday, we basically recovered a lot since that time. Now, to give you a perspective, as of right now, which we're still trading in the marketplace, on Thursday, we're down about 1% from the close on Friday. So again, we're basically almost break even for the week. Not quite. Maybe tomorrow we'll make up that 1%. I don't know. But again, it seems like the market has kind of gone, okay, this is a new reality. Let's try to figure out what's going on here. So from the marketplace standpoint, we had decent economic growth, of 2.3% versus 2.6%. Pretty solid. Consumer spending, pretty solid for the fourth quarter of 2024. So from that perspective, everything seems to be going quite well. All right. Um, Now I'm going to pick that DeepSeek back up because this is really important because this is something that as innovation happens, it's what we call creative destruction, right? We have someone create a new widget and it destroys the old widget, right? That
Mhm.
that it replaces. Um, well, DeepSeek did a couple of things pretty interesting. They did innovate a new process by which it is computationally less expensive, meaning it doesn't require as much computational power to develop this large language model. Okay, we don't know how much they actually invested to develop their large language model. What we do know though is it was much, much, much less expensive than OpenAI, which created ChatGPT. Why? Because they essentially they built their model on top of OpenAI's ChatGPT engine.
Mm.
Okay. So in this space, if you have a model, you can use the data sets of the other models that have already been created, and you can just piggyback on their developments and then make a few innovative uh, tweaks, if you will, or developments, if and then you will have a better model than the one you based it on. All right. So it is an improvement. Um, from what all the tests I've seen, it does quite well compared to their competition. All right. Um, but what we don't know is how expensive it is to develop. So when they say we developed it for $6 million, not really, because you also used OpenAI's complete infrastructure with their large language model, data sets, and cloud infrastructure to develop it. All right. They also in 2022, 23 made an announcement they have 10,000 Nvidia chips in different clusters that help develop some of these innovative AI solutions. So again, the cost I think is probably more than what they are announcing. But did they do something pretty interesting? Absolutely. Well, what they did was they innovated on someone else's model to make it better.
Hmm.
Okay. And oftentimes that's how technology does, right? You had, you know, you had a certain PC come out. Well, someone eventually makes it a little better. They innovate a little bit better. It uses less electricity. It doesn't get as hot. It has more memory. And there you go. You have a better computer. And so this type of thing typically happens. And you're going to see, I don't think DeepSeek is the last one that's going to do this. In fact, I think you're going to see a lot of different um, models being built out on top of the infrastructure of the large language models that are currently in existence. Um, but that's why you still need all of the infrastructure being built um, currently, because all they did was copy it. Well, if AI wasn't there, if OpenAI wasn't there, ChatGPT wasn't there to copy, they would have had to create it from scratch. And then it would have cost billions of dollars to develop that model. So again, I'm a little tenuous on the cost estimate that they're giving us, but it is far less expensive. They spent far less on developing their model than anybody else because they used other people's models to then innovate on top of it, which I think is great. I think it pushes the industry forward. I think it's a wake-up call to the US that China, which a year ago was probably 2 or 3 years behind the US. It kind of says, oh, okay, well, they're starting to catch up. And it signals to the administration that the quote unquote stranglehold they had on Nvidia and high-end graphic processor units, or those chips that facilitate AI development, um, not as tight as they think it is, since they still have Nvidia's old chips over there. So again, I think it's a good movement forward. I think it's part of the competitive landscape, and I think President Trump will continue to respond, and the market will continue to respond, and you'll see some great things come out of the U.S. when in regards to AI over the next couple of years.
Well, with Nvidia in particular, I think that was an interesting one to watch, right? Because again, they've been considered like the dominant stock and company that's been benefiting from this AI push from their chips, from their software applications, like different uses, right, of the technology they're creating. And they were down at one point on the day, they were down around 17%. I don't know if that's where they ended,
Yeah, that's
but
what I
on
wrote.
okay, yeah, so Monday they had a 17% drop.
Mhm.
They haven't recovered a whole lot from that bottom. And one of the things that I heard, someone else you know, analyzing the situation was that she thought that they were resetting to a more realistic
Growth.
valuation, that they were heavily overvalued at the percentage that or at the price point they were at, and now this is actually like coming down to a more realistic valuation. Do you think that that's accurate, or what's your
No,
take on that?
absolutely. One of the things that I think is interesting is this happens every time. Whenever we have a physical infrastructure type product, whether it's fiber optic, broadband, um, wireless, anytime there's an infrastructure build, uh, industry tends to overbuild it.
Mm,
They tend to have to build it to excess capacity. Why? Well, because until they build something and the demand doesn't come in like they were expecting, you don't know that you're overbuilding, right? It happens because the demand of side of the market has to respond. That's how you know, okay, maybe instead of building 25 data centers, we're going to build two. I mean, you have to go through that that testing of it because until you almost always overbuild a little bit. Okay.
Mhm.
However, and I agree with her assessment in the sense that um, because DeepSeek was able to develop a model quickly, less expensively, is it going to require all of these data centers that are expected to be built over the next 3 years to continue? Because again, lots of computational power is required at the initial part, but at the ending or at the innovation phase, you build on prior products. So are we going to need that much computational power? Um, are we going to be able to generate enough electricity to supply those data centers? All of that is a really important, those are really important aspects. And I think investors with Nvidia and with Microsoft today um, are having to reassess how many data centers do we need and what will the computational needs be for artificial intelligence going forward. My guess is we're going to still need a lot of data centers, um, even though the software part of it is going to become much, much more efficient at using electricity and using that computational power. So I think it's a mix of both, but I think do we need, how many do we need? Do we need 100 or do we need 70? I don't know. I don't know. We'll know that when we get there and we've overbuilt a little bit and the prices of computational power are so low that it's almost free.
Yeah, that was the thing that I was one of the things that I was thinking about with all of this happening. Last week we spoke about all of the different parts, all the different companies. We touched on it. We didn't talk super deeply about it, but all the different companies that are part of this infrastructure build for AI, where it's like you said, the chips, the data centers, the power producers, right? So our utility companies that are involved, the people making the actual hardware, like Dell, for example, right? And then people with software and um, there are a lot of companies in the ecosystem of AI that a lot of people maybe don't think about when they think AI and they think Chat GPT, or they think AI and they think of chatbots on a website. It's almost like, oh, that's just like a little thing that you add on to a website, right? Like that's not, what do you mean there's like infrastructure that goes around that? So I think that concept is maybe a little bit muddy for just like a normal person that doesn't use AI in their regular life.
Yeah, as it should be. Because again, the applications haven't been built yet. You know, the the actual benefits to society and to business and to the economy haven't yet even started to be rolling out. I mean, chatbot's probably the thing or the service that we run into the most as consumers because every time we get on the website for a business, there's a little, window that pops up and says, "Hey, any questions? Can I set you up?" Like I was looking for a car the other day and I got on the dealer's website and instantly Amanda popped up in the little screen and said, you know, I see you're looking at this particular car. Can I schedule you a test drive? You know, and so it was very good. It responded well. Um, but again, that's probably the most prolific use of AI currently. However, there are AI applications in healthcare, material science, engineering, software development, and nanotechnology that have just started to be trained. I mean, we talk about large language models, which are general AI. It's artificial generalized intelligence, okay, which is kind of the general. You can ask it any question and it'll give you, write my college paper for me on the Renaissance period or whatever, and it'll do it really well. But what's being developed behind the scenes is in these industries are specific algorithms, specific models that are very, very narrow, but extremely deep when
Mm.
it comes to one particular subject. And that artificial intelligence application, when you combine it with robotics, is going to revolutionize the world. It's going to help pretty much everywhere. Personalized medicine, developing new materials that make it better, make the world better, make it durable, get rid of the forever chemicals, reducing plastic pollution, um, developing uh, personalized medicines, like medicines that only work for you and would not work for me for a
Mhm.
particular issue. Um, so all of these things are so incredibly important. Um, in fact, I've been testing a couple of models about writing code. How well does it do with writing computer code? And so far, pretty well. I mean, there's a few tweaks I have to make, but pretty well. So it's interesting that all of these developments are happening, and again, it's going to be in fits and starts, and you're probably not going to hear a lot about them until we get fully into the application phase. But that application phase right now, behind the scenes, is going, and it's
Mhm.
and the companies and scientists are really and engineers are really trying to get that to its next level.
So when we see these disruptors, we'll say, right, like market disruptors coming in like DeepSeek, um, and it has this kind of, well, I don't know, is it an outsized effect or is it a right-sized effect, right? Is that like that's kind of the question that's bubbling up for me. And we talked about Nvidia in general, but well, we talked about Nvidia specifically, but because Nvidia is such a huge piece of the S&P 500, for example, right? Like it's the market cap is so big that the movement of Nvidia um makes the entire S&P 500 fluctuate, right, on an index level.
Exactly. So, for example, on Monday, the S&P was off quite a bit,
Hmm.
but the equal weight S&P wasn't off all that much. Why? Because the stocks that were down had such large market caps that they were drawing that headline index down quite significantly.
Hmm.
In fact, I had a client call me on Wednesday and says, I've made money every day this week. I'm like, yeah, you have, because he's well diversified. He owns a lot of different stocks, and yeah, I mean, he obviously went down a little bit with some of his positions because of those large technology stocks, but other stocks went up. Um, so it was a nice diversification benefit there.
Yeah. Yes, that's the point, right, of diversification. But what I think I'm trying, the point that I'm driving to, or the question I'm driving to more is like when these market disruptors do show up, like DeepSeek, and cause, like, oh, okay, we're having a shift, we're seeing a shift, right? It's causing this wake, we'll say. Um, is that giving us more information about what's to come in the future? Because
Absolutely.
yeah, the market, the stock market is a future predictor, right? It's not really based on what's happening yesterday or today. It's always forward looking, or forward indicator, right? So when we see, oh, like you used the technology that was available and innovated in a big way, um, yeah, does it, like that's the question. Like, does it lower the valuation for some of these companies going forward? Are we going to see some big shifts in how like stock analysts are talking about Nvidia, Microsoft, all and so on?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think it right sizes them as opposed to I think that the spend for the next 2 to 3 years is already kind of set in the infrastructure build. So they're still going to generate lots of really good growth. But is their growth starting to slow down a little bit? I mean, possibly. I mean, Nvidia's growth, if they continue to grow at this rate, would be, yeah, I mean, gargantuan. It's very difficult for them because they're very, very large to continue to grow their cash flows at this rate that they have for the past couple of years. That's not to say they won't grow. It just that rate of growth may be slowing down just a little bit to something that's more sustainable, but over time can really, really impact, the marketplace. Um, do we have a lot of disruptors come in? Absolutely. In fact, I would expect that the eventual winners of AI are not even the ones that are competing right now.
Mm.
You might have some of these companies may continue to be some of the winners, but you're going to have a lot of new entrants because there's so much money to be made. There's a lot of focus on it and how much it can really revolutionize business, consumers, and how we live and how we operate. Um, because there's so much potential, there's a lot of people starting to look for solutions. And like I said, it doesn't have to be the large language models that, the massive companies have developed spending billions of dollars, but it certainly could be a smaller model dedicated to one specific area that is extremely deep and extremely reliable. And I think that's an area that is really, really interesting, particularly when it comes to healthcare and yeah, particularly when it comes to healthcare and material science. Material science meaning what kind of new materials can we build to make our things better,
Mm.
instead of using steel, instead of using plastic, right? Plastic, which, famously is indestructible almost, except for millions of years being soaked in water. Um, and those microplastics all in the ocean. Well, we can make a material that is just as strong as plastic, but those bonds in some way are dissolvable
Hmm.
with a certain process, and that that's an innovation, and I think that we're going to get to that point. You know, do we have cars made of material that is extremely light but extremely durable, right? We can create that. AI can find those type of materials,
Mm.
and so
Even thinking about, and I've seen some of this, I don't know, in a documentary years ago, but you know, things like fireproof building materials
mhm.
also, like that came to mind as well, like what we saw with the LA fires and even just wildfires in general, the pace at which wildfires are um taking over different areas. You know, last year, 2024, in a lot of parts of Canada, there were huge wildfires that were hugely problematic, and lots of people live in areas that are now more prone to that than they maybe were in the past. So yeah, building materials, even in that respect, right? Like,
Sure. Building materials. I can see a day where if you want to look at firefighters, that drones are fighting the fires, not actual people, not actual firefighters, that drones with fire retardant, and water are being put into areas that are really too dangerous for humans to be, but they can go in there and really knock out some hot spots. Um, drones that are flying above us with hundreds of gallons of water and fire retardant, dropping it as opposed to a piloted plane that is doing some risky aerial maneuvers to drop these loads on the fire. You know, um, I can see uh, quote unquote robots building homes where you don't necessarily need a bunch of people to build a home because you have some machines, robots, whatever you want to call them, coupled with AI that will build them much better than we will.
we'll see, right? How, like, how far off there's a little bit of like uh maybe feels like the Jetsons slightly, right? Like from
For
when we were in
sure.
the 70s.
For sure. Hey, I can't wait to get a Rosie in my house to start cleaning the house completely. That would be great. You know what I mean? Rosie, the robot on the
Oh
jet.
yeah.
Yeah. Additionally, I just saw a video, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but I think it's real, where a kid was surfing on a quadricopter. So essentially, he had a big drone, he was standing on it, and he was flying above the road and going wherever he needed to go.
Wow.
And air taxis are, you know, they're going to be one of the next steps in mobile transportation where, if you live in Phoenix on the northwest corner and you need to get to South Scottsdale, do you really want to fight an hour's worth of traffic, or do you take a quadricopter piloted by AI and it'll drop you off in on top of a building somewhere, and it takes you 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe, you know?
Well, what then, what do we do as investors with this information? Like that's from what we're talking about anyway, right? Like how do we capitalize on that? Because one of the things I'm hearing from this conversation is, hey, Nvidia, Microsoft, all these, cybersecurity firms have had huge growth in the last several years, rightly so, right? They've done a ton of innovation. They've done a lot of work in the space. But as we've talked about over the last couple of years, when they've grown 10, 15, 20, 30% in a short period of time, once you're a $1 trillion company, it's hard to grow another 30%. Like that's a big ask when you are already that big. So where if the growth is going to slow down in some of these other areas potentially, how do you as an investor make sure that you are, you know, staying in front of that leading edge where the bigger growth is, if that's what you want, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm going to answer that in two different ways. One, I'm going to say, first of all, artificial intelligence, regardless of what happens to an individual company, is a trend that will incorporate and evolve almost every sector of the economy. So it's almost impossible not to benefit from that trend, even if you're not invested in technology that per se. Okay. Because even the companies that you own individually, let's say a utility company, right? They're going to sell more electricity, but they're also going to use AI to optimize and to balance their power generation and their power sales, right? So AI is going to benefit that utility by helping them become more efficient at delivering electricity when it is needed. All right. And not having surplus production or deficient production. So it's going to help balance. And that is going to be a great tool for AI for utilities. So taking a boring utility that just generates electricity, they're even going to benefit from. So every part of the industry of the market of the economy is going to benefit from AI. All right. So it's not necessarily what do I need to, you just need to keep invested. Secondly, these are long-term trajectories. They are not short-term. So if you're looking at, yes, they went up 20 to 30% in a year, if you have too much of it, take some off the table. Um, but I would say, don't look at them on a year-to-year basis. Look at them over a 5-year period. Really forget about them for about 5 years, because in that period you're going to have hopefully really good growth in that entire industry. Secondly, I would also not have too much of these stock if you are more conservative as an investor, or you need income, or you're retired, you're living on your portfolio. There are some other things you can do. You can have a little small part, Sure, absolutely, which I would suggest you do. But again, that proportion will be much smaller than other parts of your portfolio that need to, generate income, um, preserve your capital, and the like.
All right. So, as if anyone's listening who is a client of Juncture already, know that we're having this conversation and we are doing these things already. Right. So,
Yes. We are, I mean, we have an entire strategy devoted to disruptive technology innovation. So, if you're a client, you have participation in that.
yeah. And so when we're talking about all of these different strategies, if you don't know what your strategy is, talk to your advisor, your investment manager, ask them what they think about these new technologies, where things are going, where the market's going. Um, yeah. And if you don't know or they don't know, you can come talk to us. We're available
Absolutely.
anytime.
I can, if someone has a question about a company, I can tell them how they're involved in AI or if they are involved in AI.
Interesting. Okay. So that's a good question to pose. So if anyone has questions about AI in particular, different companies that how they might be involved, how they might benefit, how they might not, right? Like whatever that looks like, go ahead and send us those questions for next week. Next week, I wanted to talk more about crypto. So that's on the docket, more in the sense of we've got this thing on the table, sort of, from the Trump administration about creating a crypto reserve, and what that looks like and what that means. Again, this is another disruptive technology, I would say. We're just in the age of disruption, um, in big established industries, the age of Aquarius, you might say.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
well, if people listen to the podcast on the Tuesday episodes, I've talked about that before. But yes, we've got some different other disruptors coming up there as well. So I would love to talk about that. So again, not a crypto expert by any means, but we can talk about what this could look like again on a market wide, investment wide, big picture scale.
That sounds great. I'm excited.
All right, we're gonna do it. If you have any questions, as always, you can reach me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com for the podcast. And Brad, how can people get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me by emailing me at Brad Haines, BradHaines, at juncturewealth.com or at bhaines at juncturewealth.com. Or you can call us at our office at 480-253-4100.
All right. Well, thank you, Brad, for doing some research on DeepSeek for us for today to talk about what's going on. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.